Chapter 461, Beyond. Chapter 461, Beyond. Sawa led me toward one of the smaller floating gardens. He landed softly. His large figure did not cause any disturbance to our surroundings. I followed behind him, my attention captured by the beautiful sight of flowers. Most of them were dark red in this garden. It gave the entire place an almost melancholic mood. "Pretty, right?" he asked, and I could sense his pride as he gazed at the garden. "It is. But," I hesitated for a moment before continuing honestly, "it also feels sad." Sawa turned his eyes to me, and I could feel his approval as he nodded. "That it is," he sighed. "This garden holds a special place in my heart," he smiled. "Because of the flowers?" I asked. Sawa gave me a slight nod. The faint smile did not leave his face. "I don't agree with what the king is doing," he suddenly said, causing my eyes to widen slightly in shock. He chuckled as he saw my reaction and continued, "I stand by my words. This war is not for you, young ones." I lowered my head. I didn't know what to say or how to reply. Besides, wasn't it too late already? Sawa seemed to be able to read my thoughts. He shook his head and began to walk. I quickly followed after him. "The war has been heavy on you. I can see that. But you've been luckier than most, child. You may have lost your father, but you still have your siblings, you still have your mother, you still have your grandparents. That's not a luxury anyone can afford." I subconsciously nodded by his side. My eyes wandered around the garden as I thought of the past. He was right. I was lucky. No, I am lucky. But how long until that luck runs out? How long until one of us falls? Enos was injured this time, but what if I can't save him next time? Thoughts like these were constantly on my mind, but there wasn't much I could do about them. I could only get stronger. Only then would I not have to worry anymore. Sawa's old voice continued. "I will not claim to understand the point of this war, because I do not. I doubt anyone does, except for the king. What I do understand, however, is battle. That's all I knew. That's all my family knew." He sighed as he paused and used his mana to gently pluck a small red flower. "There's nothing wrong with following orders," he said and turned to look at me. "But at the end of the day, you are a dragon." His eyes flashed with a deep look as he spoke. I lowered my head in respect. His words reminded me of Grandma. "Do not be like me, young cosmic pillar. Do not regret your decisions." The red flower floated from his claws and moved to my heart as he spoke. "Follow your heart. Only you can tell what's more important for you." "Thank you for your teachings," I answered respectfully. Sawa chuckled. "What teachings?" "This is nothing but the ramblings of an old lizard." We continued walking around the garden in silence before I gathered my courage and asked, "About Foz. The city is destroyed, but the tower is not." "You mean?" "The previous cosmic pillar constructed the tower. I'm certain you've sensed it. It's a unique teleportation gate, unlike the others. It is indestructible, even if that old fool sacrificed his life for it." I nodded before asking, "But why did Irvai do that?" "Who knows? Perhaps the location it leads to was not the one he was hoping for." Sawa answered enigmatically. "Does that mean dash?" Sawa chuckled as he turned to face me. "The shades think we are inside the king's soul space. Irvai and the others have a similar chain of thoughts." "Ridiculous." He shook his head as if he had heard a joke. "We are not." I asked hesitantly. Sawa laughed loudly at my question. "Of course not. Though, I suppose it is not far from the truth to say that we are indeed trapped." I didn't say anything and waited for him to continue. My eyes sparkled with interest. He seems certain that this isn't the king's space. But what does he mean by trapped? The primordials understood that, and they tried to leave. My mouth opened in shock as I looked at the old dragon before me. "How do you know that?" I asked in disbelief. "I thought the murals and Foz were supposed to be a secret." "You seem surprised," he smiled. "Ah, sorry. I thought it was a secret." He nodded in confirmation. "It is a secret. I only know what the king allows me to know," he added with a shrug. "Is it okay for you to share it so easily with me then?" I asked with a strange look. "But does it matter? You're bound to find out anyways. What's the point in acting mysterious about it?" "So, the place the tower leads to? All I know is that we are in a small corner of the universe. Or say I've been told." He replied as he raised his head to look at the sky. "A small corner?" Sawa nodded. "Yes. The king came here for a reason, and that's why we are trapped, unable to leave." "Then dash." Sawa interrupted me, before I could continue. "Before you ask." "No, I don't know his reason. No one does. You will have to ask him yourself. It's been a while since he last talked to me," he sighed. Then the reason Irvai self-destructed, the reason he tried to destroy the tower? That old fool has been holding on to a pipe dream, one that came crashing down. He must have caught a glimpse of the truth and couldn't handle it. Another sigh escaped Sawa's mouth. We continued our walk in silence. My mind was occupied by what Sawa told me. Not his soul space, but a small corner of the universe? I paused and glanced at the sky in disbelief. This, a small corner? My mind continued wandering as I thought to where we had found lost. Does this mean the void is the edge of that corner? What is beyond it excately? What's out there? Are there other dragons? Other gods? Other mortals? Other worlds? My eyes shone as memories I have long since buried deep inside of me resurfaced. Was I reborn from a place beyond the void? Chapter 462, Pillars and Primordials. Chapter 462, Pillars and Primordials. The silence continued as we strolled through the garden. It was not an awkward silence, but a comfortable one. Sawa was lost in his thoughts as he gazed at the flowers, and I was still trying to grasp the magnitude of his words. A small corner. I suppose it makes sense. Space and the universe itself. I doubt it's something that is easily measured. Still, I wonder what the world beyond the void looks like, I muttered. Sawa heard my words and grinned. Why not go and see then? I turned to look at him, and the old dragon flashed me a wide grin before he continued. Go see with your own eyes. Do you think that's possible? I couldn't help but ask. If the king managed to come here, then I don't see why you can't leave, he shrugged. But you said we're trapped here? He nodded. That we are. It doesn't mean there is no way to leave, however. You just need to convince the king to tell you. He paused for a moment as he stared into my eyes. That is if leaving is what you want to do, of course. Sawa then waved his claw and skillfully picked another flower. In the end, you live for yourself, he added with a smile as he looked at the flower, seemingly satisfied. I nodded in response. He really was similar to Grandma. No wonder they could be old friends. How can I talk to the king? Sawa shook his head. You don't. He will come to you. I frowned but didn't respond. Sawa chuckled. Be patient, little friend. I'm sure he will come to you soon enough. But the war. The old dragon interrupted me before I continued. The war has just begun, and it will last for a long time. What are a few hundred years to dragons and deities? The flower above his claws suddenly disappeared within a water ball that materialized before him. Sawa gave a satisfied nod and looked at me. Besides, it's not safe for you, nor your siblings. I nodded as I recalled what happened back in the council. I know you're curious, and I'll tell you what I know. The Shades figured out that we were all trapped. Their old monsters fought against the king, and ever since then, they had been going around preaching that we didn't belong here. I don't know what they showed the old lizards in the council, but they managed to convince a number of them that the king was already dead. He sighed and shook his head. Needless to say, not all were convinced. This created a few factions. The first is the king's faction, with dragons and gods that refuse to believe in his death. Then there are the traitors, or as they like to call themselves, the revolutionaries. Sawa scoffed, displeased by this, before he continued. Then there are the observers, the ones that decided to stand by and not get involved. Originally, Faz was where most of them gathered. Irvai and Kalta, however, had other plans. But why isn't the king doing anything about this? I asked in confusion. If he just sends a sign that he is still alive, that should be more than enough to quell the rebellion. No, Sawa sighed again. I don't know. If I had to guess, the king is fishing. Fishing? I slowly nodded. It matters not. For now, you, in particular, are in a complicated situation. The Shades and the traitors believe that you can break through the void and lead everyone to the outside world using your cosmic mana. I don't think. No, maybe. Another chuckle escaped Sawa. Take your time, little friend. If you want to, then you can go test it when things calm down. I nodded. I have one more question if that's all right. Ask away then. Am I the only cosmic pillar? Sawa paused, and his eyes turned to face me. Cosmic pillar? Then yes. There would have been a chance for another one to be born before. But now that you've merged with the mana, there can only be one, and that is you. I nodded in understanding and asked again. Then the darkness and light pillars? Your little brother is not the only darkness pillar. But for your little sister, she is the only one alive in this generation. Nylith? I asked slowly. Sawa paused in his tracks, and his gaze shook slightly. How do you know that name? I hesitated before eventually answering truthfully. I've met him before. Me and Sidis both did. A look of understanding came over him before he let out a hearty laugh. Haha, is that so? I suppose that makes sense. So that old fossil finally made up his mind. Sawa's face turned calm with a gentle look as he gazed into the distance. What do you mean, made up his mind? I raised my brow in surprise. Sawa sighed and responded, How much do you know about pillars? Not a lot, I think. The old dragon replied. You know of the primordials. I nodded, and he continued. Then you know that no pillar has ever reached their level of power. Some came close, but ultimately failed. Not everyone knows this, because most pillars rarely survive their naming ceremony. Those that do, however, go on to attempt their merge with their respective element. The only ones that managed to do that in the past were cosmic pillars. Out of all the other pillars, Nilith was the one that came closest to succeeding. He still failed in the end, but the king intervened and saved him. Nilith was okay with letting his soul space disappear and going back to the mana stream, but the king did not allow him to do that, not until he finds a successor. So, the reason we met him then? Yes, he probably wants to train your brother into his successor in hopes that he will succeed in his stead. It's a good thing, so you don't need to be worried about it. But isn't it dangerous for Sidis? It is, but whether he chooses to go with it or not is his decision to make, not yours, little friend. I took a deep breath and nodded. I understand. Thank you. I lowered my head and gave Sawa a deep bow of respect. Out of all the older dragons I've met, he was the easiest one to talk to. Sawa waved me off. It's a small matter. Go back for now. I'm a little tired. I lowered my head and turned to leave. My mind was racing, and my heart felt heavy. The more I knew, the more complicated everything seemed. Chapter 463, Essie's Adventure. Chapter 463, Essie's Adventure. After I left the garden, I made my way back to the underwater palace. My mind was occupied with various thoughts. Once I reached the main hall, Brida's voice greeted me. How was it? She asked. I subconsciously nodded. It was very informative. I see. She answered and continued to wipe her golden spear with a piece of cloth gently. Where are the others? I asked as I scanned the now empty room. Brida shrugged. Essie is still exploring the other rooms, and Emmy joined her. Enos and Lost went for a walk together, and Sidis, I don't know. And you stayed here, waiting for me. I raised my brow and grinned. Brida rolled her eyes and didn't reply. Her gaze remained on the spear in her hands. I sighed and moved to sit next to her. A sudden silence descended on the hall before I decided to break it and ask, Do you ever regret coming along with me? Brida's hand paused, and she raised her head and stared at me. No. She lowered her gaze and continued to caress her spear affectionately. A chuckle escaped my mouth as I shook my head with a sigh. I'm not sure what to do, to be honest. Sawa says we shouldn't join the war anymore. It's gotten too dangerous. What do you think? I asked the goddess. She shrugged. I couldn't care less. The war does not mean much to me. If you pick to fight, I'll fight. If you choose not to, then I won't. I smiled as I looked at the goddess. You're very reliable. You know that? Brida's gaze met mine for a moment before she nodded and muttered, Thanks. It was then that Sidis suddenly walked in. We both turned to face him at the same time, and I could see the strange expression on his face as his steps faltered. Oh, you're back, he awkwardly spoke. I nodded. Did you see the others? Sidis shook his head. I don't know about Lost and Enos, but Essie and Emmy left the palace to explore. I see. Well, it's good that you came. There's something I wanted to talk to you about. I stood up and walked toward him. Sidis nodded. His expression turned serious as he asked, What is this about? Nilith. His eyes flashed with understanding as he nodded. According to what Sawa told me. Are you sure you don't want to? It'll be fun. Essie pleaded with her big eyes opened wide. Emmy laughed and shook her head. You can go ahead. I'll head back first. Just remember not to cause too much trouble for the mortals. Essie patted her chest in reassurance and replied, Don't worry, big sister. I'll stay in human form. They won't even know I'm there. Emmy nodded, not too concerned about her little sister's safety. The planet was under Sawa's rule, and she had felt how strong he was firsthand. Besides, there wasn't any existence that could threaten Essie in here. After all, besides the old dragon, only mortals lived here. Just then, Essie's body was surrounded by a flash of light before she transformed into her human form. She looked like an adorable young teenager with short green hair and big, bright eyes. Emmy couldn't help but nod in admiration. Essie's transformation abilities were quite fascinating. I'll see you later. Essie waved at her before she turned into an arc of green light that shot into the distance. Emmy smiled and shook her head before she left in the opposite direction. She still wanted to know what Ether had talked about with Sawa and what their next move was going to be. A green arc of light flashed through the sky as it approached a distant land. The arc paused midair to reveal an adorable young green-haired teenager. Her eyes were sparkling as she stared at the sight before her. It was a vast continent surrounded by massive lightning clouds from all sides. It looked almost as if the clouds were a barrier that encased the continent within. Essie's eyes were wide open as she stared at the constant lightning strikes. It was an intimidating sight, one that would make any mortal shudder in fear. But not her. Her grin widened as she approached the storm. She could feel the wind mana howling all around. Its presence was the greatest in this area. Yet as she flew closer, the clouds parted as if they faced their sovereign. Essie continued to walk in midair as if it was solid ground. Each step she took caused the clouds to open a path for her. Her eyes sparkled as she basked in the wind mana all around. It didn't take long before she walked past the great storm barrier and reached the world beyond it. The sky above the continent was clear. It seemed like the barrier only existed as a wall of sorts, but above the continent itself, everything was calm. Essie closed her eyes and breathed everything in. A joyful expression made its way across her face as she rushed down to the vast green meadow below. Once her feet touched the ground, Essie's eyes shone as she lowered her hand and gently played with the green grass. The weather above was perfect. A gentle breeze passed across the meadow, causing her short hair to dance with it. She raised her head and stared at the distance where a tall mountain could be seen. A giggle escaped her mouth as she muttered, "It's so pretty. Brother Enos would love it for sure as well. The earth mana is quite abundant here," she nodded to herself. Her feet were hovering right above the grass as she began to fly across the meadow with a happy smile. At that moment, she had no worries. Everything felt like it would be okay. Her eyes flashed as she caught a glimpse of a small rabbit dashing about. "Oh!" She waved her finger, and the rabbit started to float before it flew toward her. "Aren't you adorable? I'm sure you would want to experience the joy of flying with me." She nodded to herself and held the rabbit between her hands before she shot upwards into the sky with a happy laugh. "How is that little rabbit? Fun, right?" She grinned and lowered her gaze to stare at the animal in her hands, only to pause in shock. Oops! The rabbit's head had exploded as it couldn't handle the sudden acceleration. The only thing that remained was the torso that Essie was holding to. "Sorry, little rabbit." With an awkward expression, Essie released her grasp over the animal's body and watched it fall to the ground. "I have to be more careful. The wind doesn't like everyone," she muttered to herself and flew down to the ground once more. Chapter 464, Fun. Chapter 464, Fun. 2 months have passed since we came to Sawa's world. Nothing of note happened. Essie left for the mortal realm of this plane and has yet to return. Emmy left to check on her once and returned once she ensured she was all right. I didn't see much of Enos nor Lost either this past month. They rarely stayed still for long and were stuck to one another. Emmy was content with going back to her old habits of napping under the sun for the entire day, while Sidus was perhaps the most productive out of all of us. He constantly honed his control over the mana in preparation for the day he would take on the mantle as Nilith's successor. Brita was also at peace with our situation. She enjoyed spending her time walking through the gardens and sipping tea. Where did she get her tea from? I never questioned it. As for me, I have been waiting for the king to contact me, to no avail. I even built a little shrine for him in one of the gardens, with Sawa's approval, of course. Yet he remains silent. Perhaps he doesn't like my shrine? I wondered as I looked at the little statue of a dragon before me. It was crudely made from stone, and I placed it in what looked to be a miniature temple. Enos helped me make it. I wasn't sure if it was considered a blasphemous thing to do, but I was desperate. The weight was killing me. It was strange to go from constantly being in battle after battle to having nothing to do but wait. I took a deep breath and lowered my head in respect before the statue. My eyes wandered across the garden. It wasn't as big as the ones floating above the underwater palace, but it was beautiful nonetheless. Sawa had it placed in one of the rooms with an open ceiling and a view of the ocean. It gave the garden an ethereal feeling. A small smile stretched across my face as I turned to leave. Brito was waiting by the door with a deadpan expression. "Are you sure that's going to work?" She asked. Not really, but I'm running out of ideas. I shrugged. Maybe he just doesn't want to talk to you? Her words made me frown, but I didn't know how to respond, so I remained silent. 2 months of calling out to him, and yet nothing. Could he even hear me? Perhaps Sawa was right. I can only wait for him to contact me. What are you doing here? I changed the subject and asked the goddess. Your little sister is back. Essie. Brita nodded. Yes, I think she might have caused a mess in the mortal realm. I raised my brows at that and asked, a mess? Why do you say that? You'll understand when you see her. Let's go. Leaving the garden behind, we walked through the cold hallways of the palace, occasionally passing by massive windows that showcased the vast, deep ocean. I could even see some fish swimming close by. Once we reached the open hall Sawa gave us as our accommodation, I could see Imi and Sidis surrounding little Essie, who had a guilty expression on her face. Enos and Lost were nowhere to be found, so I assumed they were still outside and had yet to return. My presence did not go unnoticed. Sidis turned around to face me with an awkward expression on his face, while Imi was covering her face with her claws. Little Essie had her head lowered. What happened? I asked. Imi sighed and looked at Essie. Tell him what you did. She mumbled something under her breath. Huh. I tilted my head in confusion. She once again spoke in a whisper. I turned to Sidis and gestured at her. What did she do? She fought the mortals. His expression was odd as he spoke. Essie did. Yes, he nodded. They probably deserved it then. Her eyes beamed at my response, and she quickly raised her head. Why yes? No. Don't spoil her, brother. Imi glared at her and then turned to me. Essie shrunk under her gaze. But they really did deserve it. We are guests on this planet. Luckily, Sawa did not take offense to her actions. But what if he did? She can't be this impulsive. Imi scolded her without stopping. Well, did you hear her side of the story first? I asked in an attempt to calm things down. Imi shook her head again and spoke. Come on, tell him. I really didn't do anything wrong, brother. I made friends with a mortal, and then some other mortals tried to kill her, so I killed them. That's all. I glanced at Imi, who continued to shake her head. Details, Essie, details. Details? I asked. Yes, details on how she caused a revolution in a mortal kingdom and caused the downfall of the previous monarchy for her so-called friend. Oh, I muttered and looked at Essie, who lowered her head in shame. I didn't mean to do it. So you didn't mean to publicly execute their previous king and proclaim he's evil? Imi pressed. Oh, that. Before Essie could reply, Imi interrupted her and continued speaking. And I'm sure you didn't mean to place your friend on the throne, right? Essie scratched her head and turned to me with a pleading expression on her face. I shook my head and took a step back. Imi looked scary right now, and I wasn't planning on standing in the line of fire. Sorry, Essie. You're on your own in this one. I silently took a step back under Essie's pitiful gaze and left the hall with both Brita and Sidis by my side. Did she really incite a revolution? I asked. I wouldn't be surprised, Brita answered calmly. I'm sure there's be some sort of misunderstanding. Essie is too nice. After all, Sidis raised his brow and looked as if he wanted to say something, but ultimately didn't. Anyways, where's Enos and Lost? They left for the mortal plane as well. Lost took him to find chocolate. I believe that's what she called it. Everyone seems to be going to the mortal realm. Is it fun? I asked. Sidis shrugged. I don't know. I will take my leave first. I still need to train. Sidis gave me a short bow and left, leaving me and Brita behind. What do you think? I glanced at her and asked. About the mortal realm. Should we go give it a visit? The gardens are nice, but I am starting to get bored doing nothing. Brita shrugged. I don't care. Could be fun, I muttered. Chapter 465, Sneaky. Chapter 465, Sneaky. I waited 2 days for things to calm down before I approached Essie. She was sulking on the roof of a small palace in one of the floating gardens. I quickly scanned the area and did not see Imi. I could sense her presence in the underwater palace. Good. I teleported and appeared right before my little sister. She raised her head. Her eyes shone briefly before they dimmed, and she lowered her gaze again. I awkwardly coughed as I landed before her. Hey you. Essie harumphed in response and turned the other way. I smiled and shook my head. Oh, what's wrong with you? Ignoring your older brother. Essie rolled her eyes and replied. Why you left me alone back there? Oh, that. I scratched my head with a forced chuckle. You know Imi just cares about you, right? Essie turned away and ignored me. Undeterred, I calmly walked onto the uneven roof and sat down next to her. And besides, you have to admit, she does hold a valid point. I don't care, Essie mumbled under her breath. Now I'm not allowed to leave this area, and I am not allowed to transform either. My eyes shone as I leaned in closer and whispered, "Your transformation is similar to Grandma's, right?" Essie's ears perked. She didn't turn her head to face me but still answered with a hint of pride in her tone. Yes, it is. Grandma personally taught me how to control it. That's great. Good, good. I nodded repeatedly and glanced back in the direction of the underwater palace. Essie seemed to have caught on to my strange behavior, so she lowered her head and whispered, "Brother?" I faced her with a wide grin and asked, "Then does that mean you can transform me too?" Essie's eyes widened in understanding before a wide smile bloomed on her face. She hurriedly nodded. I can. I can. I have been training, and my control over mana is perfect now." She patted her chest reassuringly. "That's good." Essie hesitated for a second before she asked, "Brother? Are you planning on doing something bad?" A chuckle escaped my mouth, and I lovingly patted her head. "What bad would I do?" I shook my head. "I'm just planning on sightseeing." "Sightseeing? Yes, the mortal realm sounds fun, now that I don't have much to do but wait." Essie seemed to hesitate once more. But Sister Emmy said dash. I quickly interrupted her. "I won't tell if you don't. Besides, don't you want to go visit your friend?" My words were the final motivation she lacked. Essie then resolutely nodded. "I want." "Great. So here's how we're going to do this." Laying in a dark corner overlooking the massive open hall, Sidis yawned and opened his eyes. He looked at Emmy sitting next to the see-through window, admiring the various sea creatures that could be seen swimming about outside. "Are you okay with that?" he asked with a raised brow. "Okay with what?" Sidis scoffed. "You know what I mean. They will be leaving soon. And Brother Ether is with her this time. Even Brito is there. I'm sure they won't make a mess." Sidis clicked his tongue in annoyance and closed his eyes. "You ought to be more honest with your feelings." Emmy turned toward him with a glare. "What does that mean?" Sidis did not bother to open his eyes. "We both know you wanted to visit the mortal realm as well. What's the use in hiding it?" Emmy's opened in shock, and she hastily shook her head in denial. "I do not." "Sure you don't. You'd prefer to stay here watching fish through a window instead." His words earned him another glare from Emmy, after which she took a deep breath and chose to ignore him. Sidis didn't mind and continued with his nap. Bang! The floor shook as he opened his eyes with a frown. Before him was a massive chessboard, a familiar one. The black pieces were on his side, and the other were Emmy's white pieces. The white dragoness grinned. "Since you don't have anything to do, either. Play with me, huh? Can't you see I was sleeping? Why would I dash?" His words were cut short by Emmy. "Oh, are you afraid you'd lose by any chance?" Her question ignited his competitive spirit, and he quickly sat up. "Lose? Even with you cheating like last time, I would still win." We'll see about that. And I never cheat." "Shut up and make your move." In another part of the palace, Sawa's figure could be seen walking through a field of flowers when suddenly he stopped. A sigh escaped his mouth before he fell to his knees. "My king," his voice was solemn. No response came, but the air before him reverberated as invisible waves reached him. "He is well. All of them are well. I will keep them safe. You do not need to worry about that. He is still waiting for you to reach out to him. Perhaps it would be best if you did." "My apologies, I have stepped out of bounds." "No, I will not join the fight. I will keep the young ones safe, and that's all." Sawa lowered his head, but his eyes were calm. "With all due respect, my king, I'd rather die." A faint shadow of a laugh resounded across the hall. The laugh seemed like it was coming from a place far, far away. "Thank you. I will protect them when the time comes. But what choice they make is up to them. I hope you can respect that." The otherworldly presence disappeared, along with the pressure it brought to the garden. Sawa stood up and glanced at his flowers with a pensive expression before a final sigh escaped his mouth. "Okay, you guys ready?" I asked. Essie excitedly nodded, while Brita had a calm, passive expression on. Taking a deep breath, I teleported us away from the floating gardens. We reappeared in the sky a far distance away from Sawa's territory. I quickly scanned our surroundings and spotted the barrier Essie talked about. The massive dark clouds, the constant sight of lightning, and the sound of thunder. It was an impressive sight that was enough to shock any mortal. Alas, none of us were normal. "Remember the plan, Essie?" "Yes. Good, do it. With a final nod, Essie closed her eyes and reached out to her mana. The wind began to surround us gently. I stopped flapping my wings and allowed myself to be carried. Soon after, another type of mana appeared, a familiar one. It reminded me of when I first transformed into a human form with Grandma's help. A strange feeling of nostalgia overtook me. Chapter 466, To the Mortal Realm. Chapter 466, To the Mortal Realm. I didn't fight against the mana elements that surrounded me. Instead, I lowered my defenses. My cosmic mana almost had a mind of its own, but my control over it was perfect, so it did not interfere with my transformation. It didn't take long before the familiar feeling of disorientation overtook me. I looked down at my now pale hands and nodded. I clenched and unclenched my fists, getting used to the sensation. Essie's transformation was impressive. However, with my current power, I only needed a slight nudge of my cosmic mana to break it. "Oh, you look nice, brother," Essie exclaimed with a grin. Her form morphed before my eyes as she turned into a cute, short, green-haired girl. She wore a plain white dress and smiled wide as she twirled in the air. I turned to Brita, who gave me a nod. "Interesting choice for hair color," she said. Curious, I grabbed a strand of hair and lowered it before my eyes. It was purple, dark purple. I looked toward Essie, who responded almost immediately. "It's similar to the color of your scales." I subconsciously nodded. "I see." I didn't mind nor care for my current disguise. It was temporary, after all. What I was curious about, however, was this planet's mortal world. Well, now that we got that out of the way, let's go. Essie smiled happily and waved her hand at us. The wind picked up and gently carried us toward the storm barrier. The sound of thunder was deafening, and the constant strikes of lightning made me feel small in my current form. Still, a part of me felt nostalgic. It took me a long time to get the lightning affinity, but that was also lost along with the others. A sigh escaped my lips as I pushed the thoughts away. With Essie leading the way, the clouds parted before their natural ruler. We faced no problem as we flew through them and emerged on the other side. It took me a second to get used to the sudden change of sight. The world beyond the storm barrier was sunny. That was my first impression. The clouds here were sparse, and the weather was warm. It was very comfortable. Essie gently guided us to the ground. I could see the vast green meadow that extended as far as my eyes could see. My feet touched the grass. It felt soft. I turned to Essie and asked, "I'm not sure how the mortals here live, but aren't I supposed to have shoes to go with the clothes?" I awkwardly raised my foot to show her. "Ah." Essie gasped and hastily nodded. "I forgot about the shoes. One second." Saying that, she quickly flicked her wrist, causing mana to gather around my feet. In but an instant, shoes materialized. "Feels a bit uncomfortable," I muttered. "You'll get used to them, brother," Essie smiled. She then turned to Brita, who had been silent this entire time. "Hey, are you okay?" "Yes, I am," Brita replied as she admired the vast, open meadows. "This place is beautiful," she added, causing a wide smile to bloom on Essie's face. "It is. There are other places that look even better than this one." "Is that so?" "Yes. And their cities are so noisy, with a lot of people living there." "Well then, let's go." "I'm quite curious about their food," I said with a grin. I could feel my mouth watering at the thought of food. If there was one thing I had to admit the mortals did better than us, that would be food. It's been a while since I last needed food for sustenance. Still, it would be a lie if I said I didn't miss it. And what better chance to indulge than now? After a few minutes of mindfully enjoying the scene, we began to walk. Essie was already familiar with the direction of the nearest human capital. It was there where her friend was now crowned as the monarch, after all. We were in no rush and instead took our time. By evening time, we reached a dirt road with traces of carts on the ground. "So we'll reach the capital if we follow this road?" I asked. Essie shook her head. "It's not the first stop. There are a few villages and small cities along the way before the capital." Brita joined in on the conversation. "Remind me why we can't just fly there?" "Because this is an adventure. The point of an adventure is the journey, not the destination," I said. "Oh," Essie exclaimed with eyes wide open. Brita, on the other hand, shook her head with a sigh. "Journey, he says." I'll admit, the novelty of walking across green fields quickly wore off. By the time night fell, I was very tempted to teleport us to the nearest village. But my pride didn't allow me. "The whole point is the journey, not the destination," I kept repeating to myself. Ah, damn it. Why did I have to go and say something stupid like that? This is boring. I cast a glance toward Essie, who seemed as happy as always. A small rodent of sorts was flying around her. The poor creature had its eyes wide open in fear, but Essie failed to notice. Still, she gently carried the rodent and made it fly in circles around her. Shaking my head, I turned my gaze to the road. My eyes widened as a smile made its way across my face. It was dark. Only the moonlight served as a light source. Not that any of us had any problems with seeing in the dark. Still, that was beside the point. Right before us, in the distance, was a faint light. It looked like a camp of sorts. Travelers, I muttered. Brita nodded. It seems like it. Let's go, I urged, and Essie reluctantly parted with the small rodent. The poor creature dashed across the field the second its feet touched the ground and disappeared behind the grass. Bye-bye. We arrived at the camp quickly, and our presence went unnoticed at first because we didn't have any torches. I was about to speak when what looked to be one of the guards screamed in horror at the sight of us. Startled, the others hastily jumped to their feet and drew their weapons. Confused, I turned to Brita and asked, "Are we that frightening?" Brita shrugged. "Who are you?" asked one of the men, his face marred by a long scar, which gave him a gruff look. "We are but humble travelers," I calmly responded. As I approached the men, I could finally see their armor up close. Some were damaged, while others had dried blood on their armor. A frown made its way across my face. Well, they don't look like your average travelers. Chapter 467, Village. Chapter 467, Village. The men exchanged looks amongst themselves. Most turned to the scarred man, waiting for him to speak. A few were casting lecherous gazes toward Brita and Essie. It made me frown, but they were mortals, after all. I suppose that was to be expected. I looked at Brita, who had a bored expression, and then Essie, who had a thoughtful look. The men began to whisper in hushed voices, and the mood quickly turned awkward. It was Essie's high-pitched voice that broke the tension. All eyes turned to her as she pointed at the scarred man and spoke. "You guys are from the previous king's army." Her words silenced the group, and I saw their leader give a subtle nod to one of his men. Amused, I watched as 4 men pulled out their blades and rushed toward me to kill. There was no hesitation in their movements. One aimed for my head, another for my heart, and the last 2 for my stomach. Brita and Essie were standing behind me, so they were not immediately targeted. The first sword hit my head with a clang, causing my disguise to ripple like water. The other strikes followed right after. By the time the last attack came, my disguise shattered and my massive form revealed itself before them. The 4 men who launched the attack had their eyes and mouths wide open in shock and disbelief. 2 collapsed to the ground in fear. "A monster. What the dash?" A sigh escaped my mouth, and I shook my head. My cosmic mana shot back almost instantly, and my 4 assailants disappeared. There was no blood, no screams, nothing. Their bodies simply vanished. The man, whom I assumed was their leader, was smart enough to retreat the moment he saw my real form. The others were not. Some collapsed in fear, while others started screaming. Their little group quickly descended into chaos. I looked back at Brita and Essie, who were standing a short distance away from me. My massive size dwarfed both of them. Well, since it came to this, they attacked first. I shook my head. I wasn't any better than Essie, it seemed. With a wave of my claw, the dark meadow turned silent. Only one man remained, their leader. The man was patting himself in disbelief. I didn't blame him. He was running away quite fast, only to find himself teleported back in front of me. With his body visibly shaking, the man pointed at me and spoke. What are you?" His small size was almost comical compared to mine, and so I glanced at Essie and spoke. "The disguise broke." "I can see that, brother," she said and shook her head before she summoned her mana once more. My body morphed and shrank under the man's shocked gaze before I stood at 2 feet. "You forgot the shoes again." Once she materialized those, I nodded in satisfaction. "The disguise is not meant to stay on when you get stabbed, brother," Essie complained. "That was my fault. It was amusing to see them attack. I honestly forgot to stop them. Please be more careful." "You can't do that when we are in the city," Essie added. I raised my brow in surprise. "Would you look at that? I'm the one getting lectured now." I smiled and nodded. Turning my attention to the man who had collapsed on his bum, I asked, "Who are you?" He began to stammer. I approached and squatted right before him. You don't want me to repeat myself now, do you? He subconsciously shook his head. Good, so? Who are you? And what are you doing here? My name is Theodore. I was a knight under King Talon. Theodore, I said and nodded. My eyes looked for Essie. I'm assuming King Talon is the one you helped dethrone? Essie scratched her head with a thoughtful look before she nodded. I think that was his name. Her words caused the knight to gasp. His fingers shook as he pointed at her. Why you? It's you. Do you know her? That's silly of me. Of course you do. Ha ha ha. The man suddenly fell on his back and began laughing hysterically. I looked at Brita for help, but she merely shrugged. You broke him. Me? If anything, it's probably because of Essie. Essie didn't argue, and instead lowered her head with a bashful smile. I cast the man one final look. Hello, Theodore. I called out and waved my hand in front of his face, but the man did not react. He continued laughing with a glazed look in his eyes. Ah, well, I sighed and stood up. What do you want to do with him? Brita asked. What's there to be done? He attacked us first. I shook my head. Brita nodded and waved her hand. The man's body burst into a bright golden color. His crazed laughter turned silent. Once the light was gone, so was the night. Nothing was left, neither him nor his armor or sword. It was as if he never existed in the first place. Let's go, Brita spoke. Okay. Essie quickly hopped next to me. Aren't we going to rest? Mortals sleep at night, you know. I know, but I'd rather make it to a village or a town first. There's not much around here after all. Essie smiled. It's more fun in the capital. Speaking of which, just what did you do in there? How come that man was terrified of you? Essie awkwardly scratched her head. It wasn't anything bad, she said but did not elaborate. Part of me screamed that whatever it was bad. I guess we'll find out when we reach there. We continued on our way throughout the entire night. Come morning, we finally saw the first traces of civilization. Golden fields extended on both sides of the road, along with farms. Essie happily waved at the farmers working as we passed by. Her adorable looks caused most of them to stop and smile while waving back at her. Once past the farmlands, we reached our first village. It had no walls to protect it, no guards even. The village was quite small, just a few dozen wooden houses built next to each other. With me taking the lead, we walked right to it. It didn't take long before we reached the village center, where a well was situated. A few women pumping water looked at us strangely and started whispering among themselves. The smell was horrible, a mixture of animal manure and something else. It's pretty small, I noted. We are still a distance away from the capital. Essie nodded. Well, let's find someplace to eat first. Chapter 468, Village 2. Chapter 468, Village 2. With Essie's charming looks, a couple of village women happily guided us toward the only tavern in the village. It wasn't far from the well and was built in the village center. I raised my head and scanned the rundown wooden building. The tavern looked old. A sign was on top of the door, but it was too faded, making it impossible to read. Well, it's still a tavern, I noted and pushed the doors open. Brita and Essie followed behind me. My nose scrunched as I frowned. The smell was horrendous. Did the mortals in this village have no care for hygiene? My sense of smell was far superior to them. Yet bound to this small frame, the smell was even worse. I shook my head and forced myself to calm down. A glance at Brita and Essie told me I wasn't the only one. Brita was hiding it well, but Essie gagged and pinched her nose. Our arrival caused a few drunken patrons to look our way. Considering it was still early, the tavern wasn't as busy as I expected. A couple of people sitting in the back and a man sleeping on the counter. Welcome. A slightly overweight middle-aged woman spoke. I turned my gaze toward her. She was busy cleaning one of the tables. Seeing us walk in, she wiped her hands on her dress and walked over. New faces, eh? That's rare, she said calmly. What's it going to be? Food? Drinks? Or do you need a room? I glanced at my companions in hesitation. I didn't want to try the mortals' dishes, but this place hardly seemed the best option. To my surprise, it was Essie who spoke first. Food. What do you guys have for today? The middle-aged woman glanced down at Essie before a small smile spread across her face. Well, little miss, my husband just came back with a couple of fat rabbits. So how does a rabbit stew sound like? Essie's eyes widened as she nodded and gently touched her pouch. Wait, pouch? Where did she get that from? How much for 3? The middle-aged woman looked at her in surprise and then back at us before she shrugged. Since it's rare we get visitors out here, just 3 longs. Essie frowned and replied. 3 for a rabbit stew? Don't you think that's too expensive, Ani? She asked with wide doughy eyes. Hell, what expensive? I'm already giving it to you for cheap. Essie shook her head and raised 4 fingers. A rabbit stew wouldn't even go for 2. I'll give you 4, and you give us a room for the night as well. 5, and I'll warm up the water for you to bathe. Deal. Essie nodded and pulled what looked like 5 little bronze coins from her pouch. The woman laughed and replied, You drive a hard bargain, little missy. Go on and sit down first. Essie gave a shy smile and gestured for us to sit down. What in the name of the king just happened? I asked. Brita seemed to be as curious as I was. And my friend told me that one should always bargain for the best price, even if you have the money. No, wait. Your friend? You mean the current king? Brita asked. Essie shook her head. She's the queen. She's the one that gave you that. I asked and pointed at her pouch. Essie happily nodded. Yes. The mortals use this money thing to buy stuff. Wait. So how do you know how much a rabbit stew goes for? I shook my head and asked. I don't. But merchants will always try to scam you. So whatever price they first give, cut it in half and start your negotiation from there. Is that something your friend taught you as well? Yes. Mortals are funny. For them, this is very important, you know, she said, pointing at the coin in her hand. Is that so? Yes. But are you sure it's okay to eat here? It smells. Most of the mortal realm is smelly, but their food is delicious. Just as she said that, the tavern owner walked out from the back with 3 bowls she effortlessly carried and placed them on our table. Despite my initial apprehension, the smell was surprisingly appetizing. Thank you, I said, and the owner nodded with a smile. Once you're done, come to the counter for our room key. Essie nodded by my side, grabbed her spoon, and dug in. A smile bloomed on her face as she constantly nodded. Curious, I did the same. The soup was surprisingly good. It was well seasoned, and the meat was tender and well cooked. Overall, I had nothing to complain about except for the smell, of course. What do you think? I asked Brita. It's all right, she shrugged. I forgot. You guys have better things in the gods' realm. Brita nodded. After a quick meal, we picked up the key from the owner and walked upstairs to check our room. Only one was available, so we had to share. Not that anyone minded. The room itself was unremarkable, for beds were positioned close to each other, and a lone window was open. Fortunately, the smell here wasn't as unpleasant as the one downstairs. After getting settled, we chose to take a walk since it was still early. The weather was pleasant, and the village was peaceful. Most of the locals were apprehensive about us, but none approached us. Still, there wasn't much to see. It didn't take long before we found ourselves sitting on a small stone wall overlooking the scenery outside the village. The fields were green and beautiful, and a gentle breeze caused the trees to rustle. Is it you? I asked Essie. The breeze, I mean. The elements like to dance with me, she smiled in response. It's very peaceful, Brita joined in. You like it? I asked. I do. It's beautiful. Not as beautiful as my home, but still beautiful. It is. But, I'll admit, I was expecting more from this trip. Brita turned her gaze to me and replied. More? I scratched my head with a smile. I don't know, it's a bit boring. Brita chuckled in a rare moment. You already wiped out a squad of mortals as soon as you arrived. What more do you want? No, I didn't want to do that. They attacked first. Yes. Well, you might get your excitement once we make it to the capital. I'm looking forward to it. Chapter 469, Trail of Destruction. Chapter 469, Trail of Destruction. The rest of the day went by uneventfully. Come evening, we went back to our room and called it a night. The beds were surprisingly comfortable, but then again, I was used to sleeping on the ground. The inn owner later dropped by with the water for the bath. The weather outside was comfortable, so we kept the window open and drifted to dreamland after we cleaned ourselves. A part of me was expecting something to happen that night. Perhaps I was even looking forward to it. Fortunately, or unfortunately, nothing happened. A yawn escaped my mouth as I lazily opened my eyes. I could get used to this, I inwardly muttered as I pushed the bed covers away. Brita was already up and standing by the window, looking outside. I glanced at the room, but there was no sign of Essie. I could, however, sense her presence downstairs. Morning. Good morning. Brita turned to me and replied. I stretched and stood up, unable to stop another yawn. Where's Essie? Downstairs for breakfast, I think. Brita shrugged. How come you didn't go with her? I was waiting for you. Isn't that nice of you? I grinned and patted my messy hair down. I don't know why Essie made it so long. It just gets in the way. Brita seemed to sense my struggles and walked over. Stand still, she said. Her deadpan face drew closer to mine as she gently patted down my hair. I froze for a second as I looked into her deep ocean eyes. Her hands continued to fix my hair, and I didn't move. There, it looks better now, she said. Yes, I answered. Her face was still very close to mine, and for some reason, she didn't move away. No one said a thing as we stood there for a couple of seconds. It was then that the door swung open, and an overly excited Essie ran inside. Both Brita and I turned to her simultaneously, and Essie froze with her mouth wide open. Breakfast is ready, sorry. Saying that, she hastily turned around and ran back downstairs. This is the second time something like this has happened, I muttered in disbelief. Brita shrugged and took a step back before following Essie. Let's go. I frowned as I watched her walk away. Was she smiling? Confused, I scratched my head and followed. Downstairs, the tavern was empty except for a table near the entrance. Essie was sitting close to the bar, with her hands covering her face. Brita sat next to her, and I quickly followed. Essie, I didn't see anything. She quickly blurted. Sorry. Breakfast? Yes, I spoke to the owner, and it's just bread, cheese, and eggs. I turned to Brita, and I could swear I saw a hint of a smile on her face. A sigh escaped my mouth as I shook my head. Thankfully, the owner came right then with the food. The meal passed quietly, with Essie stealing glances at both Brita and me. She remained silent, however. Once we finished, the owner waved goodbye as we took our leave. Shouldn't we find some horses? I believe that's how the mortals travel between cities here, no? I asked Essie in an attempt to clear the awkward mood. Essie stole another glance at Brita before she shook her head. We can't. I don't know how, but horses are terrified of us, she said in confusion. I'm sure our transformation is supposed to cover our aura as well, but they seem to sense it. Some animals are more sensitive to these things. Brita chimed in on the conversation. Well, it's a shame, but what can we do? Leaving the village behind, we continued on our way toward the capital. It was a bit cloudy when we left, but the gentle breeze was constantly swirling around us. Our pace was fast, and it wasn't long before we left the green meadows and open fields behind. The scenery changed as small hills and mountains started coming into view. We came across a few traveling merchants along the way, but no problems like that band of soldiers. The greenery prevailed, and often, we came across some small animals running around the hills. We were heading straight toward a vast mountain with a snow-covered peak. There is a big city beyond the mountain, Essie said. It wasn't as far as I thought. That's because we were moving faster than a horse would, Brita replied. Well, let's keep that up and reach the city before sundown. Thankfully, we didn't need to ascend the mountain. Instead, we followed the road around it. For an average person, the journey would have been long, but for us, it was mostly boring. By the time the sun slowly started to set and the sky turned orange, we finally reached the city. Except, there was something strange. Was it like this the last time you came here? I turned to Essie. No, I fought with the mortals, but the city was okay. It looks like something or someone bulldozed through it, Brita muttered by my side, and I subconsciously nodded. A massive section of the city wall had crumbled, revealing a path of destruction that stretched into the heart of the city. Smoke billowed from some of the collapsed buildings, and frantic people hurried about. I have a bad feeling about this, I mumbled. Let's go. With me taking the lead, Brita and Essie followed as we quickly made our way to the city. What do we do? I don't know. Those monsters will come again next time. Why did the mayor have to provoke them? Sounds of conversations reached my ears as we walked past the broken wall. Monsters. The bad feeling grew stronger. Excuse me, what happened here? Brita walked up to one of the mortals and asked. The man's eyes turned glazed as he saw her and began to speak. 2 massive flying monsters arrived last week, demanding to meet the city's leader. The mayor went out to meet them. When he returned, the monsters left, only to come back 2 days ago and do this. Brita looked at me with a complex expression. I approached the man and inquired, what did those monsters look like? They looked like flying lizards with horns. One was golden, the other was blue. Enos and lost. Damn it, I knew something was wrong. What do you think? I asked Brita. Who knows? Still, you can find them, no? I nodded. Yes, I can. Let's see what all of this was about.